Welcome. This is Tech Noir. Jason Dolan, Seth Slick.
How's it going?
We are continuing our series, IMDB versus the Oscars. This is the second episode. We'll be doing the 1970s. We already did the 1990s, which you're like, well, that's like beginning like not in the right order. What is this like? Who are you, George Lucas? But we did like beginning with episode 4 and then going back, telling the origin. But there's this great book we referenced in the last video called Easy Riders to Raging Bulls, where you start with the Star Wars section because you're familiar with it. That was the 90s. Then you go back and start from the beginning. But what's interesting is that Easy Riders to Raging Bull was about the 70s, sort of the changeover from the studio system to the auteur system. And we're going to be going through this decade comparing the films that won Best Picture at the Academy Awards to the highest rated movies from the 70s on using the IMDb's top 250 list. And this decade, I think I had said in the last video how like no decade got it more wrong than the 80s. No decade got it more right than the 70s.
Yeah, for sure. Because there was that, that big changeover from the studio system into the auteur system allowed certain filmmakers that probably wouldn't have made such an impact in the studio system to really come forward and shine a light.
Yeah, Coppola, Spielberg, Lucas, Scorsese, all these guys sort of rose to prominence in this decade, and they actually did do pretty well, winning some Oscars, getting nominated for Oscars, but this really, like, I think as we start going through these films, we're gonna see just how impactful those guys were to future generations of filmmakers versus some of the films that maybe did win Best Picture even in this decade. All right, well, we're gonna start now with 1970. Seth, do you remember what won Best Picture in 1970? Because I know I sure as hell don't, and I have it in front of me, and I'm still like, what? This one?
Funny story, I do, because that's actually one of my mom's favorite films. That
really?
Was Patton.
Patton. So I'm going to make a confession here. I have never seen Patton. And not for lack of... Well, actually, completely for lack of trying. I've never wanted to see Patton. I've never been told to see Patton. I've never been like, dude, you gotta see Patton, only thing I even know from it is George C. Scott and him standing in front of the American flag and delivering a speech. And I know is like I will one day like watch Patton. It's never playing on TV. You really got to go out of your way for it. It's not. I mean, maybe it's on Netflix. I don't know. Fact check that, but. Even if it is on Netflix, I'm still not looking for it.
Well, I mean, it's for as far as biopics go, they can be a little lengthy, and Patton is no different. It's 3.5 hours long.
Right.
It's the guy's life from start to finish. The reason to watch it, I feel, is it's a solid film.
Right.
It's George C. Scott's performance.
Yeah.
And that's honestly, I think, why it won that year was really lifted by that speech he had in front of the American flag is pretty much what won him and the Oscars that year.
Well, the interesting thing is my go-to thing immediately was like, okay, so this is also, not only is Patton the Best Picture this year, it's also the #1 movie on IMDb. It's the highest rated movie on IMDb, I should say. However, it's not in the top 250.
Yeah, you had to go digging for it.
There's something on, it's on IMDb Pro, it's called the Bubbling Under chart, so it's 250 to 500. I think we made reference to this with our 90s segment, the first film out of the gate there. And so here we are, Patton is ranked 325. And just another note, this IMDb is going to be a fluid list. Like, I'm sure there's, like, at some point somebody's going to watch this video and be like, no, it's 324. Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's a fluid list. It's going to change from when we started.
Sure.
But I had to go look at 1970s and see what other movies came out that year. There are definitely 3 movies that came out that year that I have seen, and I did seek out to go see, and that was 5 Easy Pieces, Love Story, and MASH. And those are all, to me, like, really important films. I mean, 5 Easy Pieces was one of Jack Nicholson's, like, first kind of big performances coming off of Easy Rider, when people really discovered him. He had his like Brad Pitt moment in Dolan and Louise.
Right.
And it was like, who's this Jack Nicholson guy? He's amazing, and then we'll be talking a lot about Jack Nicholson in the 70s. Love Story, for me, I mean, it's like, that movie was super influential. Love Never love means never having to say you're sorry.
Right.
Not true at all, by the way. If anybody's ever been in a relationship, sorry is a go-to word a lot. And then MASH, the TV series, is just sort of the Korean War, but like doubling for the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
In the middle of the Vietnam War being such an important film. But Patton, as you said.
Well, honestly, to be fair, if we're talking about longevity of films and films having an impact, I would almost argue that MASH had more of an impact on the filmmaking landscape than Patton did.
Yeah.
Patton's a great film. It's really well executed, but Robert Altman putting Donald Sutherland and
Elliot Gould
together in what actually was mostly improvised scenes.
Yes.
That was the first time that the idea of improvisation was really kind of brought into the filmmaking landscape. Being a theater technique, obviously, it was, really, really built upon in the 60s. But that was never something that was even considered, and the studios, again, would have lost their minds if Altman had stepped on and said, "What are we shooting today?" I don't know. Stick them in the scene and see what happens.
I always think of that scene in The Doors where, Val Kilmer meets up with Kyle MacLachlan on the beach, Ray Manzarek and Jim Morrison, and they're talking about film school, and it's like, where's your script? I don't have a script. Go Dog doesn't use a script. I always think of that scene. But it's funny. It's almost like that even you would say that Altman was a sort of a heavy influencer of Larry David. Curb Your Enthusiasm, improvised show. And once again, MASH did spawn an amazing TV series with Alan Alda.
Exactly.
I don't remember seeing any Patton TV series, but hey, maybe there was one. I don't know. But Patton, I'm sure it's a great film. You've seen it.
No, for sure. I've seen it. It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
It's definitely worth at least one watch, if for no other reason than George C. Scott's performance.
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it one day before I die. Unless I die tomorrow, then I'm not going to do it. Okay, so now we're going to move on to 1971. This is a real fun one. This is a crazy one for me. So what won Best Picture?
That was The French Connection.
French Connection. Gene Hackman. Just a tremendous, this film feels like improv a lot, but it just, following that cop, Popeye Doyle, his investigation. It's one of those movies, by the way, I can never remember. Every time I watch it, it's like the first time I watched it. It's just something about the movie. It's just kind of like I forget it within 5 years of watching it, and so it can be a fresh experience every time. It's like I'm Drew Barrymore in 50 First Dates. But it's a great movie, great performance. I think this is just like you said with Patton and George C. Scott. I think this is like Gene Hackman.
Gene Hackman, and there were also some technical things that The French Connection did for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
That triple shot when he's shooting the guy in the back coming up the train station. That boom, boom, boom.
Yep.
That quick cut. That, there were also certain technical things that it kind of sort of started to come to light. Also, too, this was when we started to get grittier with the stories we were telling.
Sure.
If the 50s and the 60s, Popeye Doyle would not have been a protagonist in any of those stories.
He's like an anti-hero.
He is, and he was really kind of the first as far as when we're kind of flipping storytelling on its head. The first time we're actually rooting for a guy who's really not
a nice guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it almost is like an independent film, I mean, I think in the 60s, because everything in the 40s and the 50s, for the most part, a lot of it was shot in studio, and this film a lot of it was shot,
on the streets.
In the field. And, and it's like, it's sort of that slow changeover from the studio system to the auteur system where you kind of see happening. But what I do want to talk about is the highest rated movie now on IMDb.
Yep.
And that was
Clockwork Orange.
Stanley Kubrick. Hello. I mean, talk about a guy that never won an Oscar. It's this is everybody knows how Clockwork Orange is referenced daily.
Oh yeah.
TV shows, movies, so many things. I just watched something the other day. It's like, we're going to force her to watch this movie, Clockwork Orange style. It's clearly the movie for me that's rated so high in regards to just, I don't even know. I mean, just like watching it for the first time, ultra-violence, how the cinematography of Stanley Kubrick
definitely
is iconic, from 2001 to Dr. Strangelove, and getting to A Clockwork Orange it's like I said, it's like nobody could make this movie but Stanley Kubrick. Like, it's why so many people sought out to work with him.
Well, and that was the interesting thing, was a lot of folks had read the book, prior to that, and the one thing that was circulating in Hollywood at that time was, this is a great book. There's no way you can't make this into a movie.
Yep.
How would you do that?
Yep.
Stanley Kubrick was probably the only auteur director that was like, yeah, I can do that.
Yep.
And set out to do it. What was interesting about A Clockwork Orange, I remember, in the last episode I mentioned I started working at that video store. The first thing the first thing that one of my buddies there had me do was get Tarantino, bring it home, watch it. As soon as I came back, the next couple of films he shoved at me were Clockwork Orange, 2001, and Dr. Strangelove. He goes, these are the next three you need to watch. They kind of built upon that. It's like you saw where Tarantino came in and changed the landscape in the 90s. With Clockwork Orange, 2001, you saw where Kubrick really came in and changed the landscape and for Kubrick, it was always about shot selection.
Sure.
Those really long, wide takes where just action is slow and building. He knew how to create tension.
Yep. So anyway, so there we go. It's Clockwork Orange. It's ranked 79th, and The French Connection, not rated. Not in the top 250, not in the top 500. So I feel like Clockwork Orange... although, obviously, both incredible films, but A Clockwork Orange, for me, is the winner there. Now we're going to just kind of blow through 4 movies that we're just going to talk about, and spoiler, the next 4 movies, 1972, 73, 74, and 75, all the top-rated movies on IMDb, and all won Best Picture. So that's what I'm saying when it's like this decade, and this is the beginning. The first movie we're going to talk about here is The Godfather. And that's making reference to Coppola, in Easy Riders to Raging Bulls, when they're, it's kind of like, it starts in the late 60s, but this was the first film out of this new group of guys that really, because Kubrick had been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, for sure.
This, Coppola was, Godfather was Coppola's calling card. And there's nothing that we can say about The Godfather. It hasn't been said a billion times. Obviously, phenomenal movie. It's number 2 on the list. And then I'm just going to jump to 1974, which is obviously The Godfather Part 2.
Right.
For a sequel to ever win, it's number 3 on the list. It's literally 2 and 3. It's like these Coppola captured, and based on obviously incredible source material. But
of course.
Discovering Al Pacino, James Caan, Marlon Brando winning the Oscar, and then De Niro winning the Oscar in 74 for Part 2 for playing the same part. This is the reason, again, it's like kind of Brando putting almost a cap on his career. Not that he was done by any stretch of the imagination, but this was like sort of the pinnacle, and then introducing us to De Niro and who De Niro was, because this really was, like, I think this was, I forget when Mean Streets was, but if it was 73 or 74, but right there around there, but this was like definitely like, who is De Niro? Like, who is this guy going to be? For
sure, and this also kind of brought to light that shift to the auteur style, away from the studio system. Again, you get into that situation where stories like this 10 years prior probably weren't going to get told. So, and to kind of get that recognition so early on into the, we got to change something new, we've got to try something else, and to kind of have some folks to step into that mold already. Just solidified the decision of, this was the right choice.
And the Hollywood loved the epic. I mean, I think even Patton was considered an epic. And Godfather and Godfather Part 2, definitely big epics. So now we'll jump back to 73, and that was The Sting.
Yes.
Robert Redford and Paul Newman teaming back up after extraordinary success with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. But this film was, and a lot of people, it's funny, I saw The Sting 2 first in the 80s, like in the theater. Whew, what a garbage. And I think that kept me from watching The Sting for a really long time. But then I eventually had to watch it when I saw Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. And I was like, I gotta watch The Sting, George Roy Hill. And it's like Ocean's 11, sort of a predecessor of that almost. You were telling me that when you first saw The Sting, you were like...
It was interesting, because the first time I saw The Sting, I was probably... I don't know, I saw this thing for the first time probably about 6-7 years ago.
Okay.
And what was interesting about that was a lot of things that are now commonplace in the filmmaking landscape were not. There were so many things that The Sting did for the very first time. Perfect example, very end of The Sting, the sequence of events that takes place.
Yes.
that had never, that is something that audiences had never seen up until that point.
Right.
Nowadays, it's a trope that you see all the time. You almost expect it in heist films.
Yes.
Last little...
Heist films, con films, that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, it's like, and with Ocean's 11 and with, like, the grifters and, I think it makes sense. Like, it's like...
It had to originate somewhere.
Yeah, we'd seen it all before, and that's an interesting thing when you go back and watch classics too. You have to be like, what else? You have to watch it with a certain perspective.
Yeah.
But The Sting, great film. I mean, it is a really cool movie. Robert, for me, the biggest thing is about seeing Robert Shaw in a just kind of different light than he is in Jaws, which is what I knew him from, and I was just kind of like, oh wow, this guy's so different. And kind of going to 1975, I was actually thinking Jaws would have been the #1 movie in 1975. Like, I thought that's what it was going to be for sure.
Right.
Come on, it's Jaws. It's my favorite movie of the 1970s. I mean, come on, it's Jaws. But Jaws is actually 221, so I don't know if the people that need to be ranking Jaws more or... but that said, the movie that won Best Picture, and it is the highest rated movie on IMDb, is...
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Now, the cool thing about this movie, a lot of people don't know, is that Michael Douglas produced this movie.
Yep.
And won his first Oscar as a producer. That's how savvy he was. Of course, being the son of Kirk Douglas, he grew up in it. And then again, to the earlier point with Five Easy Pieces and Easy Riders, Jack Nicholson won the Oscar again. I think it's one of those things like what you said with Patton, and even that, I reiterated with... French Connection, how those films were George C. Scott and Gene Hackman, who kind of commanded those films, and the reason why they're remembered, I think that Cuckoo's Nest is remembered for Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
And that performance. And again, it's super referenced all the time. Danny DeVito has like a little role in this movie.
Yep.
I think Christopher Lloyd. It's definitely fun to go back and watch this film and see some of our kind of favorite stars from the 80s. And 90s.
Kind of coming into it.
Getting their first roles. Just like watching Jack Nicholson in Easy Riders, seeing him in one of his star-making role.
Yep.
1975, really good year. You got Monty Python and the Holy Grail, Jaws, as I mentioned, Dog Day Afternoon, Barry Lyndon, another great Kubrick film. But, I think One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
I think still sets above all of those.
I'm still going Jaws, but personally, but One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is pretty damn awesome. So then we get to 1976, and this is kind of a crazy. This is definitely our first big controversial one. Yeah. And this is the one where I would say most people are going to be like, no, the Academy did get it right, and that was
Rocky.
I mean, who love the story of Rocky. Sylvester Stallone was living in a broom closet, doing porno, had this script, the studio wanted to buy it, but they didn't want him to star in it. No, and I'm starring in it, and then it wins Best Picture, and Director, and Screenplay, and even almost won him an Oscar this past year for Creed. But, it's spawned a billion sequels, and...
Mm-hmm. And, Rocky, again, the story itself is timeless. You got that guy, he's, coming from nothing, he's trying to fight just to survive. Mm-hmm. That's definitely very relatable. So, you can carry that on. And to be fair, when you look at the string of films that have followed, when you look at Rocky 2, 3, 4, maybe not so much 5, but then you get into, Rocky Balboa, and even Creed to a certain extent, there's something that's very timeless about it.
It's a lasting character too. It's somebody who's it's kind of like it's like thinking about some of the like De Niro in The Godfather in his younger days, and then seeing him now, working in like Silver Linings Playbook, getting an Oscar nomination for that. Like just seeing it's like growing up with this guy. It's the same with Stallone, who is Rocky, but seeing Rocky grow up and what Rocky's become and how his life is turned out. But interesting, similar to Jaws, Rocky is ranked 209 on the list. And the movie that's ranked highest rated is ranked 80th. And that, of course, is...
That's Taxi Driver.
Taxi Driver, Martin Scorsese. So this was like... And I get, and this is one of the things, like Taxi Driver, again, you got De Niro coming off of his Oscar win 2 years earlier for The Godfather Part 2, and Travis Bickle... super referenced. Everybody knows Travis Bickle. as much as they know Rocky, or not as much, but they know Rocky more, I admit. But Travis Bickle's definitely, you talking to me? I'm the only one here. You know, I mean...
For sure. Well, I'd also say, as far as like impact on the filmmaking scope down the road, Taxi Driver had a bigger impact than Rocky. Rocky was an absolutely perfectly executed film. It was absolutely fantastic, but Scorsese tapped into something in the way you
the anti-hero, the way that you talked about with the French Connection, being an anti-hero, and then Travis Bickle's one of the greatest. He's like becomes the villain in the middle of the movie, and then suddenly like chickens out because he's too good. Ultimately, like he's confused, and I think it is a masterpiece. But just as far as like what Rocky spawned, I mean, what did Sylvester Stallone really give us besides Rocky? He gave us Rambo, which is very cool, but Stop or My Mom Will Shoot, Tango and Cash, a lot of duds, and he's a great action hero and everything like that. But Scorsese gave us like so many incredible films. Like he gave us Goodfellas, he gave us Raging Bull, he gave us The Departed. You know, he gave us he gave us just a legacy. Scorsese is considered one of the 5 greatest directors of all time. Yep. Even though it took him another 30 years to win an Academy Award after he first got nominated for Taxi Driver.
Well, and to be fair, I think I can also understand why the Academy chose Rocky over Taxi Driver in '76. When you think about the cultural landscape that was happening at the time.
Yes.
You know, you had Summer of Sam. You had there was the world.
There was hope. It was a movie that provided hope versus Taxi Driver, which provided hope in a different way, but in a more kind of gritty, realistic, darker way.
For sure.
I mean, you know, I don't know if you've ever tried to take a girl to a porno theater on your first date, but it doesn't go well. Didn't go well for Travis Bickle. Won't go well for you either. So, Rocky, much sweeter. So it's tough. I understand. I think a lot of people are going to be like in the comment, and please comment below. Tell us, Rocky or Taxi Driver? Which one is better? I think for us, Taxi Driver is more influential, but Rocky, obviously, I think we can appreciate the significance of its contribution.
For sure.
All right, now we get to 1977, and this is just one of those things where it's like, I get it, I totally get it, but no fucking way. So what won Best Picture?
That was Annie Hall.
Woody Allen. So put all his personal shit aside. He's a brilliant writer. He had been making so many incredible movies like Bananas and Sleepers and Take the Money and Run. So many, and Annie Hall is a phenomenal movie. It's phenomenal. It's like it really is. Like when I moved to New York, like I got it. This is what New York is like. I went to the movie theater where they were standing in line, and he does so many. He breaks the fourth wall, and he does some just phenomenal stuff as a writer. And that's why it should have won Best Screenplay. Definitely should have won Best Screenplay. It's ranked 196th on the IMDb Top 250 list, and that's great. Ranked higher than Jaws for whatever reason. But Annie Hall, I love Annie Hall. Love Diane and Diane Keaton. Yeah, should have won Best Actress, and it should have won Best Screenplay, but Best Picture was reserved for...
That was a Star Wars, A New Hope.
Come on.
Hands down.
Star Wars. Star Wars.
And again, when we've got, 30, almost 35, 40 years?
Yeah.
We're separated from this, and looking back on it, you can just, the impact Star Wars has had... Not just from,
cultural, financial, just from a business standpoint, like trading in like a little, taking less upfront salary to keep the sequel and toy rights, like the empire that Lucas built. Say what you will about the prequels and say what you will about him never directing another good movie again or whatever. He still created Indiana Jones. He still... revolutionized visual effects with ILM, THX with the sound. I mean, everything that came out of Star Wars, like Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope is the birth of like the
studio blockbuster,
the epic blockbuster, the trilogies. Nobody was really ever thinking like trilogy before, and gave us Harrison Ford, one of the greatest movie stars of all time. It's just, it goes
arguably
on and on
the most iconic villain ever created on screen.
Vader, right there. This whole, kibosh is like, this is who we were. I was 3 years old when I saw Star Wars. It was the first movie I ever saw. My mom couldn't get a babysitter. My brother wanted to see it again. She just took me to the theater with them, and thinking, like, sat in the far back, and I just know, like, they ended up, like, kind of coming back because they'd already seen it a couple times, and to watch me watching the film. And I was just like this mesmerized little 3-year-old kid. And I'm sure there's a million people out there that have so many similar stories to the first time they saw Star Wars. But and we saw it in this little theater in Maine, in Caribou, Maine. My dad was in the Air Force, that's where we were stationed, you know. And it was just, it was life-changing. And
yeah,
you know, come on. Who are we kidding? I love Annie Hall, but screenplay, best actress.
And Star Wars, best picture, hands down.
Hands down. George Lucas directed the hell out of this movie. Alec Guinness, come on. I mean, it was like Gandalf. It's literally like the Lord of the Rings, you know, where it's like every single Lord of the Rings film got nominated. And even though Lucas later on, but we'll talk about that later with him giving up the director reign so he can produce, but oh my God. I mean, it's just hands down, just Star Wars. Okay. Now we come to 1978. And Star Wars was ranked 20th. I don't know if I mentioned that or not, but yeah, 20th on the top, and it should be higher. 1978, you have
Deer Hunter.
Deer Hunter. Who remembers the Deer Hunter? Everybody remembers the Christopher Walken, Robert De Niro scene where they're playing Russian roulette.
Of course.
That is like, that's a super iconic scene. When you sit down and watch this movie, it is like going to the museum and staring at paintings, because it's a lot of very still cinematography and just sort of capturing a time, a different time.
Yeah.
One of Meryl Streep's earliest performances.
And again, solidifying Robert De Niro as
the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The 70s was a good decade for him.
Incredible decade for him and for Jack Nicholson and for Robert De Niro and for Al Pacino and for a lot of these guys. I mean, it really gave us like these incredible movie stars that were different than the Cary Grants and the Jimmy Stewarts and the Gregory Pecks and the Clark Gables, like just a totally different kind of movie star. And then, of course, also Deer Hunter is the highest ranked movie for 1978 as well at 154, which I think kind of, you know, it's partially, it's like, it is like, I think it is just like that scene where people are looking, you know, thinking that, but there also wasn't another, I don't think, super defining movie. There's nothing else that's like listed on the top 250. So
yeah, I don't think so.
But Deer Hunter, you know, I mean, like, it's definitely, I have friends who Deer Hunter is like their favorite movie of all time. You know, so if you haven't seen it, definitely check out the Deer Hunter. And finally, we're going to come down to 1979. What won Best Picture?
That was Kramer versus Kramer.
You know, I don't even remember Kramer versus Kramer. I definitely remember some of the courtroom stuff. I remember the scene with the little kid and where he can't get the kid to, Justin Henry, I think his name was. Yeah. He can't get him to eat ice cream and like, and I just, the difficulty of parenthood and childhood and stuff. And do you remember Kramer?
Well, things, I actually went back and watched this a few weeks ago.
Oh, cool.
With a friend of mine.
Nice.
Because again, he's like, I'd never seen it. And it was funny because we were scrolling through and he goes, oh, that looks kind of funny. Let's watch that. And I just kind of looked at him like,
funny?
let's go ahead. Let's check that out. And what was interesting about Kramer versus Kramer was, again, it's late 70s, early 80s. You get divorced, most of the time within the court system, the kid went to the mom.
Yes.
Because that's just what made sense to people at the time, right? Yeah. It's like, obviously, the mother's going to have that maternal instinct, so she's going to take care of the kid. Yep. This was really the first time that the mother of, the family had been portrayed as something other than saintly.
Yes.
Where all of a sudden, and it was
he was better off with Dustin Hoffman.
And that was that was kind of the issue they wanted to explore was, sometimes being a single dad isn't such a bad thing.
Right.
Sometimes that parent is more, and nowadays, when you go back, you go watch an episode of Law & Order SVU, you see that trope playing itself out all the time where you got the crackhead mom who wants to, get her hands on the kid. But back then, it was something that was taboo. It was never talked about.
Yeah.
So I can definitely see why, shining a light on something like that would definitely appeal to Oscar voters. However...
And once again, and I think, for Meryl Streep and Dustin Hoffman, I think Dustin Hoffman won, didn't he, for Kramer versus Kramer? I can't remember.
I think he did,
I think so. I can't remember.
I could be completely wrong.
We're encyclopedias, but not unabridged encyclopedias. But anyways, you know, it is one of those things where I think the writing and the performances should be rewarded. But Best Picture, like just the scope of Best Picture, like what is Best Picture? Kramer versus Kramer doesn't even crack the top 500. So it's not on the 250, not on the bubbling under, but the movie that is ranked 48th all time, and that's
Apocalypse Now.
Dun 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 dun.
Yep.
Dun, dun, dun. That was probably the worst rendition of that song ever. But Apocalypse Now, man. I mean, Heart of Darkness. Just go watch the documentary on the making of this. I mean, and speaking of like Coppola, like beginning the decade with The Godfather and Brando and ending it with Apocalypse Now and Brando and everything that happened on this movie. Little Harrison Ford playing a character named George Lucas, which nice little Easter egg there.
Yep.
Go look, he's on his name tag. It says Lucas. And you have Robert Duvall, Martin Sheen. You got Larry Fishburne in his first role as like a teenager. I mean, it's just Dennis Hopper as the photographer. I mean, the cast. I mean, they went to the jungle and made this. I mean, this movie is just. Give me a break, man. Apocalypse Now. There is nothing like it. I mean, I can turn it on, just that opening shot, the doors, the end playing, those trees getting lit up. I mean, it's like a coma, this movie, but it's like a food coma, but like for movies. It's just, I don't know. It's not even like a contest to me.
Well, I mean, it was interesting. You know, when I spent some time, you know, in the military, this is actually one of the films that the guys, you know, when you're sitting around for a long period of time on furlough, they'll pop this in amongst, you know, some of the other ones.
Right.
And again, that big, you know, and just there's some very just iconic moments, lines. You know, I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
Yep.
You know, that when they, you know, the assault on the village when they're playing Ride of the Valkyries as the helicopters swoop in and just start mowing people down.
Yep.
Like, I think.
Did I eat a bug?
And I think, and again, I understand why Kramer versus Kramer was chosen by the Academy over Apocalypse Now.
But this is the whole point of this, is because the like in the time, it's like, oh, divorce and da-da-da-da and relatable, but as like in retrospect, when we really go back and look at this stuff, I mean, again, nobody has ever said to me, maybe you said it to your buddy, oh, you gotta watch Kramer versus Kramer. But everybody has said, you got Apocalypse Now. Like, they re-released it in the theater with like a director's cut. Like, even more Apocalypse Now. It's like.
For sure. Well, again, Apocalypse Now did a couple of things, again, that were brand new. That opening transition, the trees are exploding, he's hearing the helicopters boom, he wakes up and he's staring at this
ceiling fan. Oh, man, it's so brilliant. So many incredible shots. So, yeah, Apocalypse Now. Gotta say that's the movie to watch. So, really, to sum up the 70s, you know, 6 movies matched. We see Kubrick get recognized. Coppola would have gotten recognized 3 times. Star Wars wins. Scorsese would win his first Oscar instead of waiting 30 years. If the highest ranked movie is on IMDb's list actually won Best Picture, that's sort of how it would have broken down. But once again, the 70s, they got it right. You know, more so than anything else. More so than anything else. 6 out of 10 times, everybody was in agreement, and
it's a good ratio. Yeah. The thing is, you know, for the rest of these, you're never going to see anything close to that.
Yeah, that's it. Because there's only 14 total, I think I counted. So this was 6 right there. Yep. And we'd already had 2 in the 90s. So that's 8. So we're already from the 70s and the 90s, we've already got more than half of them out of the way.
Yep.
So there you go, guys. That is episode 2 of the 1970s of IMDb versus the Oscars. Please like this video, share this video, and subscribe to Tech Noir. Got a lot of great stuff coming up. We're actually going to be jumping right in and doing the 1980s now, but that'll be the next video. So just click next, and you know, maybe it's in the sidebar. There'll probably be a link right up here. And click that, and of course we have chapters down below if you want to go and just watch a specific year anytime. You can do that as well, and if you want to just show a specific year to somebody, we'll be making mention of that.
Yeah, for sure. Also, if you guys think we're wrong, please let us know. Let us know in the comments down below.
Hit those comments up. Yeah, we want to hear what you have to say. I go and read the comments. I'm really excited to see the response to these videos. All right, guys, thank you so much, and we are out.